Turning now to another tech darling, Frank Quattrone. Quattrone has staged a remarkable comeback as Silicon Valley's go-to banker. He became a star during the 90s dot-com boom, bringing nearly 200 companies public, including Amazon and Cisco. But his career was sidelined in 2003 for 4 years over an obstruction of justice charge. Eventually, an appeals court overturned his conviction and the government dropped the case. He's earned sweet revenge since then, starting a boutique advisory firm, Catalyst Partners. He's been involved in nearly every major tech merger in the last year, including Dell's bidding war with HP over 3PAR, HP's acquisition of Palm, and Texas Instruments' recent purchase of National Semiconductor. Clearly, he's challenging top investment banks for the biggest deals in technology. Randall Smith wrote the book on Quattrone, the Prince of Silicon Valley. He's also a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Randy, welcome to Bloomberg West.
Thanks,
so first of all, what is it about Quattrone? How does he get into these deals over big banks like Goldman and Morgan Stanley?
Well, I think he knows the players. He's been out in the Valley since the early 80s, and he knows most of the major venture capital investors and most of the major tech executives. And so he has been able to repot himself from the dot-com bubble when he led the most tech IPOs to currently when companies are being sold and are not being taken public as much, but are doing mergers and getting ready for IPOs.
Now, he did fight these obstruction of justice charges for 4 years. How did that really affect his reputation within the industry?
Well, I think it gave him a somewhat tarnished reputation on Wall Street, but on Silicon Valley, in Silicon Valley, there was a feeling that he was being, I think, a scapegoat for the excesses of the dot-com bubble. His firm was charged with any number of violations, including spinning and biased research. And there were so many regulatory probes after the dot-com bubble because the tech stocks had, and particularly internet stocks, had gone down so far. People were looking for people to blame, which is not unlike the current environment after the last meltdown.
Now, he did not cooperate with you on this book, right?
That's
tell
correct.
me how his relationship with the media has evolved from before he fought these legal battles up till now.
I would say he became more press shy, not just with me. He was pretty open and friendly during the 90s when he moved from Morgan Stanley to Deutsche Bank and then to Credit Suisse. I wrote a profile of him in 1999, which he cooperated with, and you know, I think he was fine. But then once all the dot-com stocks went down by 80% or more on average, he kind of buttoned up, and there was an investigation of Credit Suisse starting in really in the middle of 2000, which lasted into early 2002. A few of his brokers who worked with him, were actually fired by Credit Suisse for handing out IPOs or demanding excess commissions, oversized commissions from clients who were trading clients, and that sort of kicked off a number of different probes. And that first one, where his brokers were fired, was the one he was accused of obstructing 3 years later.
You know, it's kind of a shame he doesn't speak to the media more often. I've seen him speak at conferences, and he's really a masterful public speaker. In terms of his dealing with other businesses, what's his attitude? He was quite a showman in his early years. Has that part changed over the years?
I don't think it has. The last time I saw him was at a TechCrunch conference on the internet or on TV, and he appeared with, I believe, a Philadelphia Flyers jersey on because it was around the time of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So I think he's not afraid to brandish a quirky personality. I think he is still basically press friendly, even though in the recent New York Times profile of him he said, oh gee, I'd rather you not write the story. I can't believe he wasn't very happy with it because it talked about his big comeback.
So in terms of the question, is it luck or talent in terms of his success, what do you think the answer is? Oh,
talent for sure. I mean, he is, as you say, a very charming guy. He was very aggressive about bringing attention to himself during the bubble, which was during the dot-com bubble, which was a, you know, it kind of went against him when Eliot Spitzer and all of his followers tried to go after the people on Wall Street. But I think what happened to him is an interesting case of after the current bubble, you've heard people, including the guy who did the Oscar-winning documentary Inside Job, when he did his Oscar acceptance speech, he said, well, hey, they have not prosecuted anybody on Wall Street for all this stuff in the recent meltdown. Quattrone is an example of what happens when they do go after a big fish after a bubble bursts, and they tried to get him and they couldn't get him. He was charged with any number of violations by securities regulators, and all the charges were dropped. He was convicted of obstruction in 2004, but he managed to get that overturned on appeal. And he was even barred temporarily from the securities business, but that was overturned as well. So he outlasted them all. He had a huge legal team, and he won. So I don't know if that's why people think it's harder to go after Wall Street guys after the last meltdown, but it's certainly got to be in the back of their mind.
Right now, his boutique firm, Catalyst, has only about 30 employees. I mean, how do you see his business evolving in the next phase? Well,
there is a big difference between his profile now and back in the dot-com bubble. And one of the differences is he's not working at a major firm, which he did during the 90s. He is working at a boutique under his own umbrella, and he does not have a sales force because he's not taking companies public, so he doesn't need a few dozen salesmen to call the institutional buyers and sell the stock. He can do this on his own nickel, just advising CEOs on how to get the bidding up for their own companies. So it doesn't take as many people, and he's got his leading merger banker from the last bubble, George Boutros, who just joined him recently.
All right. Randy Smith, author of The Prince of Silicon Valley, about the fascinating story of Frank Quattrone. Thank you so much for joining us on Bloomberg West.